Sur la News 24 continuiamo.
De Kiev, une base militaire serait entre
Across the West, the world woke up to images of war and leaders lining up to condemn Russian actions.
A vast invasion is underway, by land, by sea and by air.
This morning, President Putin ordered atrocious acts of aggression.
We now have war in Europe on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history.
A punishment plan for the Russian invasion followed. Phones ran hot between capitals as the US, the UK and the EU tried to coordinate the next bundle of sanctions. Boris Johnson was the first to unveil the UK's contribution.
The UK is announcing the largest and most severe package of economic sanctions that Russia has ever seen. These powers will enable us totally to exclude Russian banks from the UK financial system. We'll be imposing asset freezes on more than 100 new entities and individuals.
In Whitehall, some dare to hope these measures might destabilise President Putin himself. But they've yet to persuade all EU allies to go further and ban Russia from the SWIFT international payment system, a platform Russian banks and companies need to trade. The EU wasn't ready to sign off on that, but promised action to match the UK's moves when this emergency meeting in Brussels tonight finishes.
We will later today present a package of massive and targeted sanctions to European leaders for their approval. These sanctions will suppress Russia's economic growth, increase the borrowing costs, raise inflation, intensify capital outflow and gradually erode its industrial basis.
Behind the scenes, global negotiations are going on to try to make sure that the EU could survive without Russian energy supplies, but it's going to be a massive task to pull off. EU dependency on Russian gas shot up after the first Nord Stream pipeline was opened, with smiles and fanfare in 2012. It dipped after Russia's seizing of Crimea, then climbed again to more than a third. Germany gets 2/3 of its gas from Russia. For some Eastern European countries, it's 100%. This afternoon, G7 leaders held an emergency virtual summit.
I just spoke with the G7 leaders this morning, and we're in full and total agreement. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy.
As recently as David Cameron's premiership, this group met as G8, with Vladimir Putin joining the meetings. The culmination of efforts started years before, when hope sprang that globalised economic links could make outsiders embrace a rules-based system. Now, Western countries are taking an economic hit, hoping it inflicts a much bigger one on President Putin's regime. And at the end of Downing Street, Ukrainians weep for a country which the Russian military is on a mission to crush.
Gary Gibbon, well, the Conservative MP Tom Tugendhat is chair of the Commons Foreign Affairs Select Committee and is with me now. What do you think we're looking at?
Well, I think this is one of those moments that we'll remember in history for a sudden shift in the way politics is done in Europe. This is the first time we've seen a state-on-state conflict in Europe since the Second World War. It's an extraordinary decision by a head of state to launch an unprovoked war of aggression against a neighbour, and that's exactly what Vladimir Putin's done. So I think this is one of those days that really will live in infamy.
Right, but in terms of what we should be planning for, what we should be adjusting for, are we just looking at Ukraine?
No, we're looking at the changing dynamics between Russia and all of her neighbouring states. Sadly, I've spent much of the day, you won't be surprised, speaking to friends and colleagues in the Baltic states, in Eastern European countries, and indeed in some Western European countries, members of parliament, members of government, about what's going on. And all of us have the same reaction, which is this has changed the consensus. This is no longer the sort of post-Cold War world. This is no longer that period of peace that we've just enjoyed for 20, 30 years. This is now a moment where we've got to think again about the very real threat of force to ourselves and to our people.
I mean, bluntly, people all around Britain tonight, I'm sure, are asking each other, are we on the brink of a wider war? Of something that would be a very prolonged war?
Well, I hope not, is the honest answer. But can I say more than hope? It's hard to, because the decisions that are being taken by Vladimir Putin are the ones that are shaping the decisions we all are reacting to. Now, I am very reassured by NATO's reaction. I'm very reassured by the US commitment to put more troops into Eastern Europe, by our commitment to do the same. Even France has been speaking about it too. I'm also relieved that in conversations with the Latvian Defence Minister this morning, they are increasing their defence spending, and others in the neighbourhood are doing exactly the same. This is a big change. So I hope what we're going to see is that we're going to see this stop at the borders of NATO, but that's no relief for the people of Ukraine who are being so brutally attacked tonight.
What about the impact of sanctions? Do you think stronger sanctions sooner might have headed this off?
Well, I've been arguing, as you know, Krish, for sanctions since serious sanctions since 2017, 2018, when I took over the chairmanship of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And many of us were calling for stronger sanctions somewhat more privately. I was still a soldier then, so I couldn't do it publicly. In 2008 and 2014, when Russia invaded Georgia and seized Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and when it invaded Ukraine for the first time and annexed Crimea. So many of us have been calling for those for a long time.
But is there any evidence that Putin cares about those sanctions, that they would change his mind about anything?
Well, the problem with the sanctions in the past is that they haven't changed his mind because they haven't been really implemented. Former President Medvedev of Russia said only the other day, we know how sanctions work. They impose them, we ignore them, and then they come crawling back for the business. So we've got to make sure these sanctions are meaningful. And that means, I'm afraid, getting personal. We need to be seizing yachts. We need to be seizing homes. We need to be seizing assets of those people who are linked to the Putin economic plan to enrich himself and his friends and to wage war in Europe.
I mean, there are still relatively few individuals revealed in today's sanctions that are being pursued. I mean, is it that hard to go after them, or do you think it's possible?
Well, there are, I hope, going to be many more revealed. The Prime Minister made a very clear statement in the House only an hour or two ago, and he didn't list the individuals who should be sanctioned, but you'll note that I asked him about those who are cooperating with Putin's economic plan, people like the former Chancellor of Germany, Gerhard Schröder, the former Prime Minister of France, François Fillon, and asking whether they are in scope of the sanctions, and he confirmed that they are within scope. Now, whether or not they will be sanctioned, I don't know, but I think that all those enabling Russia's war of aggression should be aware that they could be sanctioned.
And what about the Conservative Party donors and the money that they gave?
Well, you know that I've been very critical of various elements of this already. The Conservative Party at the moment states that it has only taken money from British citizens, and I'm sure that's correct. I'm absolutely certain that they are legally compliant.
Linked to former ministers.
And my argument has been exactly as you put it, Krish. My argument has always been just because somebody is entitled to give doesn't mean that you should accept.
Right, so should it be given back or done something else with?
Well, I certainly think that going forward we should be extremely clear that we will not accept money from people who are connected to hostile states.
What about the Prime Minister's authority to lead now? I mean, this is a man who has a party in which MPs are calling for him to go. He's being investigated by the police.
Krish, you'll understand today the focus is very much not on Downing Street, but on Kiev. What we're really focused on is how do we manage to get a collection of people together who have got very different views on how Europe should respond into the same place so that we can hit this hard. You know, the real challenges we've got are Germany's energy dependency, Italy's economic difficulties. You know, we need to get our European partners and our NATO partners into the same place.
And how sure do you feel that if Putin doesn't seem to care now about the threat of sanctions, that if he goes to Ukraine in force, he then looks to the Baltic states, to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and thinks, well, they might be members of NATO, but is NATO really going to act?
Well, the Latvian, one of the Latvian ministers I spoke to today pointed out to me very clearly that the same line that he used in eastern Ukraine, Putin has used for the Russian populations in the Baltic states, that they may need protection, as he calls it. Now, this is the protection in the same way as the mafia offers protection to individuals. It's a protection racket, not genuine support. So this is something that I think many people are concerned about, and many of the Baltic states that you've highlighted are concerned about. And many of us are also highlighting that 30-mile strip of land that connects Poland and Ukraine, but actually divides Kaliningrad, which is a Russian enclave on the Baltic Sea, from Belarus. Now, we need to make sure that Putin realizes that an attack on a NATO country is an attack on all of us.
Tom Tugendhat, thank you very much.
Thank you.